Welcome. This is Hot Flash of the X Faction, and this is the Minority Report. Today we have Angelle Maua of the Gender Fluid Collective, which supports transgender and non-binary people, BIPOC, and in the LGBTQ community. Welcome. We're so glad to have you here. It's really nice to meet you. So, without further ado, can you tell us why you started the Gender Fluid Collective?
Sure. My name is Angelle Maua, and my pronouns are she, they, and AE. And I started the Gender Fluid Collective out of my son's transition almost 3 years ago. He came out right after he turned 15 and told me that he was trans. He was a sophomore in high school. He was depressed. I didn't know why. Behavioral issues, you just like kind of blow it off as, oh, he's just being a teen. You know what I mean? Um, and then he just texted me when I was at work and he says, Mom, I think I'm trans. And I'm like, okay, let's talk about this when I pick you up. He wasn't driving at the time. And so we just had a conversation like what I was surprised. What I was surprised but not surprised. I knew he would be in the LGBTQIA2P2 plus spectrum somewhere. I didn't know where, but trans was not on my radar for that. And that was fine because I love my son unconditionally. You know what I mean? That's it. Just there's no manual, there's no right or wrong way to support your child, I believe. And you get that pushback. Oh, well, you shouldn't encourage this kind of behavior, and it's just social media driven, and it's just peer driven, and it's blah blah blah. No, I know my son, and found out that he had been researching his identity since he was 10, since I gave him his first smartphone because he was a latchkey kid. I'm a single parent, so the phone was critical to him staying at home by himself and being in contact with me when he was older. When he got older, daycare was kicking my butt. So he told me that he researched it since he was 10. He was 15. He knew, he just didn't know how to tell me. And I was like, well, you can tell me anything. So long story short, it was in October. So we were approaching the open enrollment, and I had to find out the research, like, will my insurance cover, the hormones, will the transitioning, all the stuff that comes along with being 100% your authentic self. And when you're changing genders like that, that can be expensive, especially if you're single parent. So long story short, I reached out to the community and they're wonderful. Don't get me wrong, but they don't look like me. Or at that time, they didn't look like me. And I didn't know anybody from the similar families that were having the similar struggle as I were to support and center my child and through his transition. And I was on a board at that time, and I told the person, the ED of that board, that I wanted to do this, but um, it was well received, but there was just we didn't agree on a lot of different things. So I separated myself, and I was like told as a parent I was not going to be able to do this, not by the board, but just different individuals, like, well, how are you going to do this, and blah blah blah. And I just did it. I created spaces for us to have 100% authentic talk, to be ourselves. We don't have to code switch, we don't have to explain, we don't do any of that. And it just evolved into this resource hub of providing binders, because I carry binders and supplies with me all the time in the back of my car. So if I should encounter somebody that needs anything, I have it. But now I send them out via mail because of COVID. And making the connections with mental health, because I'm from the medical field as well. So the mental health connections, the legal connections, the health connections to top surgeons, and getting referrals and things like that. So I just used what I've learned and just shared it and made those connections and stayed in contact with those people that helped me through my transition, and cultivated relationships with the San Diego LGBT Community Center and the San Diego Black LGBT Coalition and P-Flag San Diego and Glisten San Diego, and just cultivated relationships that I would knew would help me not only with my transition with my son, but also the families that I want to help and uplift and center. So that's how it started. And I've been running almost 3 years now, still doing it out of pocket to myself. I do get donations this year as of March with everything that's happened. I got a lot of allies that have been sending in donations, but prior to that, this was out of my own personal pocket. I supported this solely. That's what I went to work for, is to do this work.
Wow, that is completely amazing. Um, Earlier you said that what one of the impetus was that there weren't people that were like you, and so you
Mhm.
started this. What do you mean by that?
Um, when you go into a support group, or back then when you went into a support group or any kind of queer space, there weren't too many African American that were out or non-binary or trans that I knew immediately in my immediate sphere. You know, even though I'm from that community, finding folks like us used to be hard. It was like trying to find a unicorn. You know what I mean? It was just, unless you knew somebody and knew somebody knew somebody, or you just went around in those social circles, which we didn't, because I was still trying to learn how to navigate. I was new to the area at the time. I was only three here for 3 years. Yeah, 3 years when he came out. So I really didn't know much about the art community, let alone the Black LGBTQIA plus community. Um, and they really tried to support, but you couldn't identify. Like the parents couldn't identify to the different things that we do, like our lens that we live in and walk through every day. They don't experience the same experiences I do, so we couldn't relate, you know what I mean, or they couldn't understand, or I always had to explain how I felt in that moment or share my lens, and it just wasn't the same. So that's what I meant by walking into a space and nobody looked at me. There were no brown folks. There were black folk, no black folks, but they were brown folks, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Do you have any examples?
I went to a meeting. I'm not going to identify what group because I don't want, it's not their fault. But I did go to a meeting. I lived in North County at the time, but now I live in South Bay area. But I went to a meeting. There were a lot of parents there. There had to be about 6 parents, but they were all white. Um, and then the youth group was all white, and my son just stayed in the car. He didn't even want to go in because he already knew, nah, this is not my jam. I can't, you know. And then everybody was on their devices. He likes to talk. He's very mature for his age. So he likes to have those conversations. But it's hard when somebody's looking at their phone the entire time. And the group was fine for me. It was just that it was triggering in a sense because I have had kind of got up to speed to where my son was to some level, and the verbiage that was used, and like transgendered, you know, that triggers me because they're not using it correctly, they're not saying it correctly. They associate your gender expression and gender identity with sexual orientation. Then you have to, you know what I mean, I felt like I was in a one-on-one class and not in a space where we can actually have some healthy deep dialogue, if that makes any sense, because you're always having to explain everything. So it was a bit exhausting, but at the same time I know they were trying their best to try to identify and support me.
Well, yeah, get it. I myself am not a trans person, but I am often people assume I am or they misgender me. And initially I wasn't totally into it like 30 years ago, but now I've come to be okay with it and getting onto the non-binary part. Um, but what I do realize is I grew up with a white family in a white neighborhood, and I experienced tremendous racism from white people. And I looked a lot, I had a lot more darker complexion, I had an afro. This was like the 70s. And I think that if I had been a man or a boy, I would have been arrested and maybe not even alive now. Uh,
Wow. Sorry
because
about that.
so much of the drama that happened, it was always when the cops pulled me over, it was always like they thought I was a black guy in the wrong place and they would just immediately start to try to cuff me, and then somebody would tell them my gender and they'd leave me alone.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering how your son's experience is, if that has changed now.
No, it hasn't. Actually, it's gotten worse now that he's driving because he has a nice car. He has a white car with a graphic race stripe on it, but it's not modified. It doesn't, you know, it's just your standard equipment on it. But it looks really good. It looks like he could be in a race. So you get all these, he gets more attention than he needs. And I always worry about him. He has had some, not in school necessarily, but just out in public. He has a white girlfriend where, you know, my background is very diverse. I'm mixed, I'm multiracial. So my family, you know what I mean? So he understands the dynamics of the just how our family works. And so he wasn't used to white folks being so negative towards him because that's our family dynamic. So he was out with his girlfriend. She's a beautiful girl, kind of in a bubble. So we had to educate her too about supporting a black man. That's a whole other story. But they were out at the store, standing at the stoplight going back home. And this is not far from our school. And this is in North County in a fairly nice area, Rancho Penasquitos. You wouldn't expect this. A guy drives past them and called her a nigger lover. You know what I mean? And they were just kind of like, wait, did he just say that? And she was devastated. She had never been called out, for having a relationship with a black man. He has never been called out the N word ever in his life. And he was 17 years old. So that was his first experience with a grown person. I'm sure he's had some microaggressions in school. We all do. But he knows how to navigate those. He knows he's better than that. We've have healthy talks about his history, loving who he is, embracing who he is, regardless of what that looks like. But this was like a slap in the face to him. So I actually had to have conversations with him and his girlfriend about that, because if they're going to be in this relationship, they are going to get some pushback, and they are going to get some microaggressions and even aggressive verbal assaults. You know what I mean? And it's scary. It's very, very, very scary. But he had a gun pulled on him when we first moved down here while he was driving on the 805. He actually is on the 54 getting off of Sweetwater. He had a gun. They were trying to brake check him, and they thought that they could create an accident to pull him over. I think they were trying to get his car or trying to get to him, and they couldn't succeed. So when they couldn't brake check him to slow the car down, somebody rolled the passenger window down and actually put a gun on him, and he just got off the freeway. Thank goodness. But yeah, we have to have safety on the freeway talks, like pull over, let that person pass. By the time they get off and come back around, you're going to be gone. You know what I mean?
Was that just a regular citizen that did that?
Yeah, that was a
What
regular citizen. And
what
I
race
don't,
were they?
I have, they were brown or black, but
Mm,
it was such a blur, and
mhm,
he was not trying to look at that person, but he
mhm.
could see out of their peripheral what they were doing. That's in itself is scary. You know what I mean? So it's coming from like both sides, and I don't know why. I think a lot of it has to do with him and how he carries himself, and the vehicle has a lot to do with it too. But when he's out with his girlfriend, he does get a lot of microaggressions and sometimes verbal assaults.
So back to you. I'm so glad you've created this collective. I mean, it's amazing.
Thank you.
Amazing work you're doing. Since you've created it, uh, how has it gone? How have you helped? Do you have any examples of helping people, especially in this climate in 2020 with
Hmm.
George Floyd and all the Black Lives Matter protests? Can you speak to that?
Yeah. So when I first started out, I met a group of young folks that I have known since they were like 15, 16-year olds. Now they're 18, 19-year olds. I have been on their journey with them from the time that they've come out to navigating mental stress, finding where they fit in society, going through their medical transitions, and they are fine young people. Someone didn't think they were going to graduate high school, and they did with flying colors because they were told they weren't going to succeed, and they were this and they were that, and they were really struggling. And I am so proud of that person. Oh my goodness. And I just recently went through a medical transition with the one that is I knew since 16, 19 this past week. So just being a part of that journey, for them trusting me that much to have come along on their journey, and cultivating that relationship to be a trusted person outside of their immediate family, if they have that support, and if they don't, they know they can come to me, has been very heartwarming for me. I've helped out by providing binders to middle schoolers. I've been called by middle school counselors to come down to the school and talk to middle schoolers that need support because they just didn't know what that looked like. And this is in San Diego Unified, and ended up being a word of mouth thing. I gave a binder to one middle schooler, and then they call, my friend needs one, or my other friend needs one. You know what I mean? And it just progressed. And I work in tandem, hand to hand with San Diego Unified LGBT Advisory program that they have down there, Ebony Weathers. And she helps me, or I help her when I'm needed to bridge those gaps and get the resources that they need. Now, 2020 is a different story. That was hard because I had to figure out, how do I get these like binders or STPs or packers or whatever they need to them without compromising our health. So I had to turn to online resources like GC2B is where I get my binders. Amazon is very resourceful for packers, and I have other online things for STPs, and that's just out of supporting my son and using the same resources he uses. So now I just have a form on my website. They fill it out. I contact them. I ask them what they want, get their information, if they can get it mailed to their home, or if they don't, if I need to bring it to them, and then I just do the transaction and it goes directly to wherever they want it to go. No questions asked. You don't have to fill out 10 million forms. I just need to know that you're of legal age, and if you're not, if you're supported on some link, or if it's discretionary, I have to figure out a way to get them the supplies without violating the trust of their family. You know what I mean? Because again, even if the family doesn't trust them, they're still their parent. So I have to trust that dynamic. So far, I have not had any issues with that. They've been fully supported, or they had a cousin or an aunt or a grandfather or something that I would send the stuff to, and then they would get it that way. So it's been working out so far, and that has blossomed into conversations and anti-racist training. So I've been doing a lot of anti-racist training with the County of San Diego, Health and Human Services. Um, Outside of that, with the San Diego LGBT Community Center, with the volunteers, the board and staff, because we need to change the dynamic between them and the Black community. They need to earn our trust again. And just wearing a lot of different hats since March, since George Floyd, because these young folks are leading this movement. And I am so glad to be at least on the cusp of that, you know what I mean? Just in the periphery of that. And I'm so proud of them. For a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old, or even a teenager, young teenager, to know who they are 100% themselves without wavering. I wish more people were like that. I mean, I'm just in awe of them, that they can be this strong and be themselves and be confident with way things are right now. So I will do anything to support them.
Um, I just, I don't know, about a month ago was the Transgender Remembrance Day.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and a lot of the statistics was brown and black, femme, trans women. Um, it was very unfortunate, the murders. Have you, in your encounters, had to help anybody in dangerous circumstances?
I did. A couple of folks, and I wish I had more of the resources, but when I did have the money, because we did a pen fundraiser, um, I've had somebody in a domestic violence situation, or somebody who couldn't find a home or couldn't pay the rent. Unfortunately, I can't help everybody, but if I have the money at the time, I can. And then I refer out to House of Resilience, and I refer out to other folks I know in the community that are able to help our trans women of color, black and brown, mainly black. But unfortunately, there are not immediate services. Unless you call 211, you have to be either in a domestic violence situation, HIV positive, or on drugs. That's crazy. You know what I mean? They don't have just regular housing for folks who just are in between, or just can't pay their rent and they need a month to get all that money together to get another room. And it's just frustrating. I will get texts and calls on a Sunday morning or Sunday night, and it seems like everybody who's doing this work is Monday through Friday, but everybody shuts off on Saturday and Sunday. And when I'm scrambling, texting folks for help, nobody, it's, I get a very few people that will actually respond and say, hey, we'll do this. Or, hey, you know what I mean? This is 24 hours, 7 days a week work. This is not your regular Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 work. If you're going to volunteer and do this work and be passionate about it, there are going to be folks that are going to need your help on the weekends and 2 or 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. Somebody just might have gotten into a fight and got this. And for example, somebody got into a fight with their family and got kicked out the house. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. You know, um, luckily they found a room, but they need the money to get the room for the month. And I told them I can give you the money for the room for the month, but you're going to have to come up with the rest. I can't. This is a one-time deal. So that's why I have fundraisers. That's why I try to think of ways to make fundraisers. That's why I have my and usually 9 times out of 10, I never raise enough money, and then I end up coming out of pocket with it, which is fine because that's why I do what I do. If I have the money, I will definitely help. But I'm trying to figure out how to do a housing fund specifically for those instances because I have the transition supplies down. It's just the housing because our housing situation in San Diego is horrible when it comes to trans non-binary and especially our BIPOC community. It's just horrible.
Yeah, I was hoping like after this, you can provide me with links to the various resources and your fundraiser links and Venmo, and we'll put them in the down below in the comment section.
Okay.
Awesome. Wow, it's incredible. Yeah, the work you do is just it's blowing me away.
No, thank you. I honestly, it's something I'm super passionate about. And it's really hard to find people that are on the same page that are just as passionate. I get folks to come and want to do the same thing and then they burn out. Like I do have burnout periods, but I bounce back. Everybody has a burnout period, but I can't walk away from it. You know what I mean? Not knowing that there's folks out there like my son. Luckily, my son was fortunate enough to have a parent that fully supports him in every way, but not all people have that support. And then we forget about those who are over 21 and up to 40 years old or older. You know what I mean? We have all these programs for, younger kids, even as young as elementary all the way to 21 years old. What about those foster kids that are queer that are in the system that matriculate out of the system? There are very few agencies that give them the tools and the resources to get a job, interview for a job, know how to budget, find place to live, sustain that place to live. Learn how to work on a car and maintain your car when you have a car. You know what I mean? There's so many different things to just living, and we're lacking in a lot of places.
So, does your organization support any age?
Yeah, I'm open. I'm very inclusive, and I get some pushback from folks like it's supposed to be for us, by us, and blah, blah, blah. But no, I am one of those people that just can't refuse. And I hate to have a cap, if that makes any sense, because I feel like I'm doing a disservice if I'm in this parameter. I'm the type of person that I do shit and then I'll think about it later. But if I can help, I'll do it. And then I'll think about the consequences later, because usually it's not as bad as I think it's going to be. But I try to help very young kids if I can, as young as elementary, which I have. I've advocated for them in their school setting and changed that whole dynamic for that young person as young as 9 years old. Um, and they're thriving now. And as old as 50 something years old. So I really don't have a guideline of parameters or cap or an age group. I help who I can help.
That's great. Is there anything we know you funds obviously number one. Is there anything else that you would like the public to know about your organization, how people can help you?
Um, that I'm here. And I notice a lot of people post like, oh, if you want to donate to a Black owned company or a Black owned organization here. I'm missed. I think I'm kind of like under the radar for some folks in uh, our community. A lot of folks do know about me. In the Black community, not so much. But I think I'm slowly getting out there in certain circles. And then certain circles I'm not really well received, and that's fine. I still love everybody. I know everybody's doing wonderful work for whatever reasons, you know what I mean? And maybe I'm just not thought of at that time, when they're doing these different things. And that's fine too. But I have not, I've been pushed back, I've been carved out, I've been, invisible, I've been talked about. You're never going to get everybody that's going to like you and agree with what you do, and that's fine. I have no animosity towards anybody. Is just waste energy. I don't have the energy or to put into that negativity. So just know that I have a website, I have a Venmo, I have a PayPal. I do have an IG page that has a huge following. I have over 1,200 followers, which is I think is huge compared to what I had last year. I think I had like 400 or something. But I have a wonderful group of volunteers that work. They're from the whole spectrum. I have Asian, I have non-binary, I have white, I have trans non-binary. You know what I mean? Trans masculine, trans feminine, and they're wonderful. And they help manage my Facebook and my IG. So if I'm not reachable, they'll reach me for you. And any donation I welcome. It goes straight into what I call the Loving Body Program, which is on my website, and it lists everything I have to offer. And if it's not on there, we'll figure it out, as well as the form to contact us to let us know what you need. So I don't do a lot of fundraisers, especially now, because I personally like Giving Tuesday and all those different things that they had going on recently. People are in crisis now. People are struggling. Not everybody has a job. I didn't have a job. I recently just got a job. Thank you, Lord Jesus. I'm so happy. That's like the best Christmas present ever. But who wants to be on unemployment? Unemployment's running out at the end of this month. Not everybody's getting an extension. So how stupid, how insensitive would it be for me to like do all these funding, oh, give to me, give me. I mean, and I hate when people send me emails like, oh, would you give $100? No, this is not the time to ask for money now. If they have the money to give, if you're in that situation when you have money, you work, and it's not a problem, it's not a burden, it's not a hindrance, please, I would love that. But I'm not in it for the money. If I don't get it from donations, it definitely comes from my own pocket, and I don't mind doing that. They're like my kids, so yeah, it's like family.
Well, thank you so much, Angel, for being here with us on the Minority Report. Um, your namesake, Angel. Seriously, I'm not trying to be all puns and stuff, but you know what I mean? It's just amazing work. Um, we're gonna get this video out there and just let people know what you're doing and get you more support.
Yeah. And there's other organizations that popped up now. It used to be, so you have the San Diego Black LGBT Coalition, you have my agency, you have SFX, their mental health, you have but there's Black resources at the, like I said, the San Diego LGBT Community Center. You have House of Resilience, you have March for Black Women, you have Transistence Network. There's so many other resources, and you just have to find where you fit, where you feel comfortable. But I'm really proud to be at this point to speak on having other resources and other folks out there doing the work too. I'm so proud of everybody. If I did not mention everybody, I apologize, but it's just I'm loving this, that I'm able to actually just rattle off a list of Black run or owned agencies for our community.
That's great. That is so great. Well, thank you for being with us tonight. As always, it's been a pleasure. And yeah, we're going to sign out from this interview with the Minority Report. And take care.